The fundamental attribution error basically tells you about how things can go wrong when you're not applying systems thinking to a particular situation, particularly in business management. So here are some questions that will help you understand why the fundamental attribution error is actually probably the most important thing that in systems thinking, especially if you're in a people facing role. Why do we instinctively blame individuals when something goes wrong? So it's all a matter of perspective and the vantage point that you're in when you're trying to analyze things that have gone wrong. In most cases, the outcome is usually a result of multiple processes within the system that you're considering that is in question. And unfortunately, accountability ends up being distilled or boiled down to just one person's role, simply because the person separated from the system, rather the system separated from the person, seems too complex to handle, to understand. So it does you well to sort of just instinctively blame the pin onto just one person because they seem to be the most accountable in that particular situation. What have we been taught about accountability in workplaces? It's usually accountability is boiled down to just one person bearing the entire load of the problem, rather than it being like a distributed sort of a thing where everyone everyone is to be blamed, and everyone sort of says that, okay, this is where I fumbled, this is where I made a mistake, and this is where I need to improve. It's usually not the case that for that to happen. It's usually the case, oh no, let's just find out the weakest link and blame the entire thing onto him or her or them. Yeah. Are people really the primary cause of outcomes, or is that just the simplest story? We human beings are extremely social animals, so any mistake doesn't, in reality happen in a vacuum of social interactions. It always happens in the ether that is shared by all of us in that particular situation, the ether of social interactions that we all share. So no, people aren't really the cause of these outcomes. They're not the primary cause. The primary cause is the matrix, and yes, some people might would have to share more accountability than the others, but at the end of the day, all mistakes happen within that ether of social interactions. How does the fundamental attribution error quietly shape our judgments every day? Because we're unable to see the bigger picture, the holistic perspective, we're unable to see the system, which is much more complex than the individual who takes the action. So because we're unable to separate, because we're unable to see them as a synergistic type of a thing where the person made some stupid mistake, but the system was also to be blamed for it. Because we're unable to do that, we end up separating the person from the system and blaming the person for the entire thing. Why does focusing on who messed up feel so natural? I think there's a bit of spite in this. Like, I think, for anything bad that happens, I think everyone wants to blame someone. It's to sort of, it's like a good and evil thing. Like, everyone wants to sort of pin someone with the blame so that they can perceive them as the wrongdoer. I think it's like we are looking for the smallest story, the simplest story that can explain everything, and the simplest story usually involves blaming one person as like the wrongdoer, the evil person, or at least that's how we've been brought up with respect to the movies we've watched, right? Like it's not all It's all black and white, even when it isn't. Like, it exists in shades of grey, but we're not really accustomed to thinking about things in systems like that. Why does focusing on who messed up feel so natural? I think I just answered that. What do we miss when we ignore the environment behind behavior? I think what we miss is that the system itself is a living entity. It's an organization that updates. It has some kind of a sentience of its own. If you think about sentience as the collective sort of organism that emerges out of a million different people, hundreds or thousands, or, basically multiple people interacting with each other, and so because that bit is more complicated than just using reductionism to deal with the concept of how that organization is working, I think we end up sort of over-indexing on individual wrongdoings or doings in general, than to see the full picture. I think it just takes more brain powers to see the whole picture, and I don't think most of us put in that kind of energy to sort of understand what exactly is going on. How does over-blaming individuals damage trust and culture? Well, for one, you've lost the trust of that individual who is being over-blamed. That person is probably going like, well, that's not me entirely, is it? I mean, there's this chain of events that basically, happened like a domino effect, but I'm being blamed simply because I was the final domino. So that damages trust, and that makes people fear about their jobs and about what might happen if they made a mistake, that it might all come crashing down on that person, even if they didn't really contribute the extent to which things are being blamed on them. How does this thinking trap both leaders and employees? So leaders get trapped because, employees get trapped because the answer that I just gave sort of explains why employees feel trapped. Leaders feel trapped because there's pressure on them to sort of, outcast the wrongdoer, or sort of put things in alignment again, and sort of outcast. It all comes down to, the repercussions of blaming that singular person. And now the leader is like, I think I can see the whole picture, but for some reason the rest of the people are mad at me because I'm not outcasting you, so I'm going to have to do that. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but that's the kind of dilemma that leaders might be put in. What changes when we shift from blame to attribution across systems? I think shifting from blame to attribution across systems would definitely, make the organization more robust, would restore trust and faith in the system itself, because individuals in that system aren't experiencing other people as individuals, they're also experiencing them as a part of that system. So if blame is systematized, if the system takes the attribution for the blame, then I think people would feel more confident about being backed up by that same system, and leaders would feel less pressured to sort of, it would feel more like a team effort for everyone, that that we can share the risks and the rewards together, and we don't need to sort of be under the kind of pressure that everything, that I'm going to be the last domino and I'm going to be singled out because of that. How do we start seeing behavior as a product of incentives and context? I think most people are unable to model human psychology in a way that would enable them to see that that behavior is an emergent phenomenon. It's not that just someone behaves. Again, going back to the ether of social interactions. Nobody behaves in a vacuum of social interactions. Everyone behaves in relation to one another, and that is something that needs to be seen from a systems perspective itself, that this kind of a thing is happening within that matrix of social interactions. It's not something that exists completely far separated from it. What question should we ask instead of who's at fault? I think the topmost question is where are we misattributing or over-attributing or under-attributing the blame? Could the blame lie with maybe not just one individual, but maybe there was a miscommunication somewhere that was that didn't actually come out of incompetence. It just came out of something that wasn't intended as such. I mean, obviously, you'll find cases in which incompetence is also a problem, but it might not be in all cases. In fact, it might be the case that you might be pinning the incompetence on one person, where it might be a problem that would have occurred like a domino, like tiny dominoes, not really encapsulating incompetence, but just day-to-day misunderstandings. How can leaders redesign environments to produce better outcomes? I think education. You have to understand the ether of social interactions that affects us, and that's how things are so easily misplaced or miscommunicated. And yeah. What does real accountability look like in a systems thinking world? I think real accountability looks like every single person owning up to the things that were in their control and that they could have done it better. This is something that Simon Sinek talked about when he was talking about relationships between people and conflict resolution, where every person is going, here's, and this is in Simon Sinek's words, each person is trying to go, this is where you were wrong and this is where I was right, so let me put the blame on you. When in reality they should be going, this is where I was wrong and this is what you did right. That makes people a lot less defensive and a lot more productive in terms of actually resolving the conflict. Yeah.